I remember the time before I was conscripted into the military. Back when it was just me, my wife Oscar, and my son. I remember him being full of energy, playing with me while I tied the plow to our family mule for another day's hard planting. I remember my wife coming out periodically while I was in our field to give me and my son drinks and sandwiches. Watching my wife enjoy my son eating a sandwich was one of my secret favorite things about her. I hid some things I like about her a secret. That way she's not tempted to overindulge me, since I like the natural processes, the more joys and happinesses. I remember my son to be a hard worker for a boy of 9. I would joke to myself that he would be the man of the house while I retire at the age of 33. One of his favorite hobbies was to plant seeds in the plowed tracks of our family farm. I remember the day started off like any other day of my farm, except that day, an officer from the Russian conscript army arrived with his private escort of soldiers. They drove up to my house and walked in like they owned it, eyeballing the things we curated throughout our lives for any signs of monetary value. I mostly keep my son's wooden carvings on the mantle, so the fat, greedy officer looked disappointed when he saw my average-looking life with my average-looking wife. I remember the officer, who stopped. He looks around the house, then he looks my wife up and down and says,
"Nothing of value here.
Then he turns to me.
Except manpower. Your country needs you, comrade. It needs you so much. You don't have a choice in the matter. I'm sure you got the letters."
I did. That's why I got our stuff out of the house. I told him, barely hiding my defiance. Truly I knew the day was coming. But I let the illusion of my once perfect life lull me into believing they would pass me by just because of my ripe old age. The news I heard out of Stalingrad was terrible, and part of me actually wanted to leave, despite having to say goodbye to my wife and son. There was still a chance we might lose this war, and some of us had to fight for our country.
Well, we have a car and a uniform waiting for you. You'll walk in our farm and luck for you.
The officer says with an obvious sense of smugness given by his rank and new power over me. He's lucky he brought his men. I'm allowed to say my goodbyes and help my wife and son pack their things to leave to my wife's mother-in-law's house, or the witch den as I call it, since the old lady seems like no fun and quite prudish. But even a witch den is better than nothing. I leave them with a promise. I will do everything in my power to come back. The last time I see my wife and son is through the quarter window of the crowded car as we drive away. I remember rising through the ranks fast as a very capable hand-to-hand combat specialist. With my large frame and years of farm work rendering my muscles into peak physical shape, I found it easy to keep my promise each day of training. In the coming weeks, the same wealthy land baron who conscripted me showed me some favor by appointing me into the position of sergeant, where I trained other men in hand-to-hand combat. It wasn't long after that I found out that he was the son of some rich land baron. He was given his rank by his wealthy dad, so he didn't have to fight in the front lines at Stalingrad. One day I was made to gather some files for that Badcatz Gustav, who didn't bother telling me where to look. That's when I stumbled onto the deed for my own house, along with a copy of a balance sheet for selling it. I was furious, and then I looked around some more and found out that he's keeping partial payments from our payroll, essentially stealing money from the entire company. And out of my own stupid impulsiveness, I sought to confront him over it later that evening with the evidence in hand. My plan was to rally the men against Gustav and have him rolled out, either by having him turn in his own uniform or by giving him a medical, injuring him so bad he would have to leave for good. Most of them were too cowardly to stand up to an officer with his family's connections. I know I could trust a few men to say they will stand with me. As a real leader, I can make the most out of very little. And And my first true victory will start here against the system. When he comes into the office, I confront him, and my men immediately betray me by telling him that they've brought me before him as a seditionist and a usurper. Next, the captain laughs sadistically.
I would have a hard time believing anybody who doesn't.
He lights a pipe and smokes it, then he looks at me.
Fight for my loyalty.
And that's when all my men punched and kicked me from all sides. During all the punches and kicks, I noticed Gustav examined the evidence I was to present against him, which dismayed him into stashing it into a drawer with a false bottom, placing his stash of stolen watches.
That's enough. These men have violated company policies, and now I'm gonna fast-track them. Escort them to the next train to Stalingrad.
The men speak their pieces, and they plead and protest until Gustav signals for the night guards to aim their weapons at us. Then we are silenced all the way to the front lines at the Battle of Stalingrad with the few weeks of training that we had. Now in the cursed lands of Stalingrad, we bear witness to the terror of the warfare of our time, as undead German soldiers and past encounters are set upon us in waves, along with the mechanically augmented Nazi super soldiers that man the street howitzers and the machine guns. At Stalingrad, we traded blows with the Nazis, pitting our genetically altered Bearman against the Nazi humanoid monstrosities that threw against us. Even the waves of undead Nazi soldiers were thrashed to pieces by the Bearman's superior mobility and strength. The problem with the Bearman that I witnessed was the instability of the genetic alterations, and the fact that you could never go back. That made me never want to become a bear soldier myself, even to save my own family, since I could never go back home again. The battle for Stalingrad was fierce, with our sides shifting hour by hour, day by day. The only certainty was uncertainty. You had to take enough food and water to survive for days, since there was no guarantee that we would be sheltered day after day. It was in the coming days when our side of the battle line took a particularly hard hit. The brass above my commander passed down an order to shoot anyone who retreats from the front lines. The day after the order, we're running from the Nazis' new super weapon, genetically altered werewolf men, to combat the Bearman we've set against them. Without any plan to stop these things, we fought quickly. The lucky few to still be left alive end up running back with me towards the camp. I made sure the slower men had fire support, so I waved my men forward to the camp. That's when they opened fire on us and killed the werewolves and half my men. I managed to hurl a grenade at my company commander, manning a machine gun, and I blew him into pieces. And for saving my men's lives, I was apprehended by loyalists and taken into custody.